Hey everyone, and welcome to WitCode, where in this video we're going to be building a video player. So this is going to be the final product what we're going to be making. We're using JavaFX and Java, and you can see some.
So for example, we're going to call this.
This is the media viewer here that's playing the video. We can so we can press play,
and then
pause. You can see the timer here is in sync with this here. So when we move this, you can see the time adjust appropriately. We can also change the volume.
The home page of the website, basically.
And
then the next thing you need is handler. And this is important because this houses your request object and the response toolkit.
And you can see the volume decreases. You can also click here to mute and unmute. Another thing you can do is you can change the rate. So it's playing right now.
Talking about roots, but for now, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to return.
You can just change the rate at which it plays. Another thing you can do is you can set it to be full screen. So you can see we're in full screen mode when we click this icon here. It changes so we can exit out of this. And then another cool thing you can do is you can move this. Let's see what happens when the video finishes. So this goes to restart. And if we press replay, you can see it starts the video over again. So this is what we're going to be building. And of course, as usual, I will provide a link in the description with all this code. So all this detailed code will be available through my GitHub. I'll post the link in the description. But for now, let's get the video started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new project, a new JavaFX project. And then I'm going to place it in the desired location. Now that the video is loaded, I'm going to start applying the JavaFX files, or the JavaFX library. So I have an in-depth video that I also post in the description on how to get this started up, but for now I'm just going to do this really quickly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to File and Project Structure. I'm going to go down to Modules, and then I'm going to add a module here. I'm going to do it from a library. I've made a global library that is JavaFX. I'm going to add that, I'm going to apply it, and then press OK. You can see all this red as everything has been imported. And the next thing I need to do is change the VM options. So I'm going to get those actually from my project in here. So I'm going to go to main, edit configurations. I'm going to take these out here. I'll also post these in the description. So I'll post all this information down there so you can do it as well. But I'm going to take those, go into here, main, edit configurations. I'm going to go to modify options right here. Add VM options, paste these in, apply, okay. And now let's run it to make sure everything is working correctly. Excellent, and so now we're ready to start coding. And so what I'm also going to be using to build this is I'm going to be using the scene builder down here. So if you don't have a scene builder installed, I'm also going to leave a few links on how to install that, but I'm going to assume you do right now, and so I'm just going to go into scene builder. I'm going to start building from here. And the first thing we want to do is let's remove this grid pane because the root of our project is going to be a vertical box. So for that, I'm going to go into containers, go down to VBox, drag that in here, and that'll be our root. So the first thing we're going to do with our vertical box is we're going to change the properties, layout, and code. So the only thing we want to change for the properties is we want to change the alignment from top left to center. And then the next thing we want to do is let's go into layout, and let's just add a min width 500, and min height 500 just to get everything to show up better. And then let's go into our code. Let's give this an ID of VBox parent. Of course, the ID is how I'll be linking it to our controller. Now the next thing we want to add is let's add our media view. So this is what we're going to actually use to show our video. So I believe that is in controls. I'm going to go down here to media view. I'm going to add that to the VBox just like this. And now we're not going to change any of the properties. For the layout, what we are going to do is we are going to add we're not going to do anything to layout either. We're just going to go into here, into the ID. We're just going to add MV video like this. And then the next thing you want to do is let's just add a slider. So this will be the slider that is used to change the progress of the video. So this will be below our media view, of course. But so let's go down here to slider, horizontal, and add it in right below here. And then for properties, what we want to do is we want to style it a bit so that when the user hovers over it, it's a hand instead of the default pointer. So we're going to do fx cursor, and we're going to set that equal to hand. And then let's just add some padding. So let's go into our layout. And for padding here, I'm going to do 5, then 10, then 5, 5, 10, 5, and 10. Press enter. And now let's also give this an ID. So I'm just going to call this one slider time, because this will be the time of our video. Now the next thing we're going to add is a horizontal box. So we've added our vertical one. Now let's add one of our horizontal ones. So I'm going to go to hbox here, drag this in like this. And then the things we're going to change for that is let's go to the properties and let's change the alignment from this to be center left. And then let's add some padding. And then the next thing we want to do is let's just give it an ID. So of course we can link this again, and this will be hbox controls. Let's just make this a lowercase. Hbox controls, just like this. And now let's add a button. So again, that'll be a control. Let's go in here, and we want to add this to our hbox. So I'm going to add that in here. This will be, of course, play, pause, and restart our video. And the only thing we want to do this with properties is let's just change again, add some style. So we're going to do FX cursor. We're going to change that to be hand, just like that. And then let's actually do a layout. Let's give this a margin. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to margin, and I believe let's change this on the left to 15. And then let's do the usual of giving it an ID so we can interact with it in our controller, which will be button. And it's going to be P, and then R. Press enter to make sure that's gone. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a nested hbox within here that's going to host our volume components. So to do that, we are going to need another container, another hbox, and let's put it, oh, not right here. And now for this, what we want to do is let's just go into our layout, and we're going to put a margin on the left of 5. And then we're just going to give it a code for the controller of hbox volume, just like that. And now let's add a volume label. So this is going to be the hbox to hold our volume components. So let's go there here, and let's add another label. So I'm going to hbox, drag it in here. And then what we want to do for the properties for that is we want to align it center and to the left, which of course it is by default. And then we just want to add our style of the cursor, and we want to do a hand for that. And now let's go into our layout, and we're going to add some padding. And so that's going to be 0, 10, 0, 10. And then of course we need to give it an ID, and this is going to be label volume, just like that. And now the next thing we want to add into our horizontal box is another slider, and this one is going to be to control the volume. So of course another horizontal one. So we've got our slider in here, and then what we want to do is something that's very important to change is for our properties here. We want to make sure this is 1, because if you're changing volume for a media player, the range by default for a slider is 0 to 100, but that won't work because the range that works for volume is only 0 to 1. So any decimal in between that, like 0.5, is half volume, but 50 out of 100 would be an incorrect value. And then of course we also want to change the style, so we're going to do the cursor to be hand, and then we're going to give it an ID. Or actually, yes, we're not going to add any layout, we're just going to give it an ID of slider volume like this. And then the next thing we want to add is we're done with our horizontal box here. We want to add a label, so another label, not into the hbox, but into this hbox here. And this label is going to be used to show our current time. And what I want to change in the properties is the font. So font here, I want to change this from system to JetBrains, and then I want to change the style to bold. Just bold, not bold italic. And then I want to change the size to be 18, just to make it look nicer. And then we want to change our alignment, or keep this as center left, but we want to add a style. And then once again, the style for this, or no, we don't want to add a style for that, just keep that the way it is. And then we're going to go to layout, but what we do want to add is a margin. So we're going to do 0, and then 10 on the left, and then we're going to give it an ID down here of label current time, just like that. And now the next label we want to add is for our total time. So we've got one for current time. Now let's add one for the total. So we're just going to place that here, and then let's go into the properties. Let's do the same thing with the font as we did with the other one. And then let's add some padding into our layout. So go to layout and go to padding. We want to change this just on the right to 10 like that. And then let's just give it an ID in our code. And we're going to call that ID label total time, just like this. And then the next thing is let's add our horizontal box that will house our components to make it full screen and everything. So that will be under controls again, or sorry, that will be under containers. And then we're going to go for HBox. And so what we want to do with this is let's just go to our layout or our properties, and we want to change this alignment to center right. And then another important thing we want to do is we want it to stretch out all its space. So what we're going to do in layout is we are going to set hgrow from inherit to always. And now let's add a label into this. So this will be in controls. Drag a label into this newly made HBox, and this will be for our full screen. And what we want to do for this label is just, of course, change the font and everything to be consistent with everything else. So we're going to do JetBrains, bold, and change the size to 18. Then go into layout and give it a margin on the right side here of 10, and then give it the ID. This will be our speed. So we'll do label speed, just like that. Now the final component we want to do is another label, and this will be to actually make it full screen. So add it to our HBox in here, and we're going to go to properties, and we do want to change this cursor or style to be the hand instead of just the pointer. So we're going to do that, and then we also want to go to layout. We're going to add a margin, or no, not margin, but padding of 10 on the right side, and then let's just give it an ID of label full screen like this. And now let's just make this something better. So all this text, I'm not sure what it really means. I believe it's some form of encoding, but it comes from the text we have in here. So if we just change this to blank, we'll get rid of them because we're going to fill it up with actual values, so we don't need that. And then something we need to do though is with our HBoxes, we're going to go to this, right click on it and do use computed size. And same thing with this HBox here, we're going to do use computed size. And now we've got that going. I think we might, or no, just leave it at this. And now let's just see what this looks like when we open it. So let's just play it. And so right off the bat, you can see this is what it kind of looks like. So you can see how it'll come together. We'll have our label over here with our volume and stuff. This is our volume slider. This is our slider for the time. Our media view is here. This is the button for play and pause. So now let's start linking that up in our controller. So I'm going to go over into here and let's start working. And so remember that we can link all these variables to our fxml file by setting the variable name equal to the ID and tagging it with @fxml. So for example, in here, let's get our media view. If we go into code, we can see MV video is the name of the ID. So in here, if we do @fxml and then declare the variable right underneath it and call it media view, I believe it was MV video like this, this will make it linked up to this right here. So then we can interact with this component. So now let's just import some of the other components as well. So you may also notice that here this isn't separated. So this fxml is just for this video here. These are separate things. So we'll talk about this later, but we need a media player and a media to work with a media view to actually get the video to be displayed. But let's just keep importing more things. And something you should also notice is for this here, we don't want to import java.awt.button. We want to use the JavaFX button. So make sure down here we do JavaFX instead of JavaAWT. So now I believe we have everything imported. I think it'll throw an error if we get any misplaced. But let's just press play and see if we get an error or something, because you can easily mess up typing in all these names and making sure they match with the IDs. But I think we should be good. So let's just keep working now. However, now I'm going to declare some Boolean variables to determine if our video is playing or not, if it's the end of the video, or if the video is muted. These will definitely be coming in handy later. So below here, I'm just going to do private Boolean and declare them here. And so you can see that when the video will first load, the end of the video is false because we're at the beginning of the video. Is playing is true because when we start running it from up here, the video will be playing, and we set is muted to true because when the video starts, it's just going to be muted from the start. And then finally, let's declare our image views that will be the pictures that will be placed on our labels and buttons. And once again, make sure that you're using JavaFX and not Java Swing. So you have to check that also for the slider, label, and everything. So just make sure you're using JavaFX. And so these image views will be using images that we will place in a resource folder in here. And so, of course, because this will be posted to my GitHub, all of these resources will be available to you. So if you want to use the same images that I'm using, they have their background removed, so it's pretty good to use them, and you can add those to your video. So just check my GitHub link in the description. You'll be able to download these images and use them on your project as well. And now, before we start working with our scene and adding functionality, let's implement the initializable interface to our controller class. So I'm going to scroll up to the class here, and we're going to implement initializable. And so this interface is used when you want to interact with the stuff injected with @fxml, or this tag here, because during construction, the @fxml variables aren't filled, so you can't interact with them. But JavaFX will call initializable after everything is set up, and then it can work with all our fxml nodes. And this is done by after we implement this interface here, we can override the method initialize, and then we can work with our initialized or our fxml variables from within there. So this will appear here, and it'll say implement methods, and then of course we want to implement initialize, and this is where we're going to be doing the majority of our work for this video. So now let's do a bit more setup. What we're going to do is find the path to each of our resources that are in our resource folder, and we'll then load them into the appropriate label or button. So what I'm going to do just easily is I'm going to go to our other project from within here, and we had this whole resources folder, and I'm just going to copy it. So I'm going to do right click, copy, I'm going to the sources here, I'm going to paste this in here, press OK. So this might have taken some time to add, but you can see now we have our resources in here. So this is the videos we want to play, or the button that we want to use, or the images for the buttons, everything like that. So the first thing we're going to work with is our media view. So you know that to create a media player, you need to implement a structure of nested media objects. You need media, a media player, and a media view. The media is the actual media object, and it represents our video file. So let's retrieve that and set that up. So if you remember, we were called media view video right here. We're going to set that equal to a new media, and then what we're going to do in here is we're going to create a new file, just because the media object takes a string that is a URI, and instead of specifying the absolute path to my resources folder in here, I'm just going to be specifying it locally. So I'm going to do source-resources-final.mp4. So this is the video that we're going to be showing, and then I want to call toURI and toString. So this will create this represents our actual video. And next thing we want to do is, so our MP video, we're going to set that equal to a new media player, and we're going to pass in our media video just like this, because the media player is what we can actually call methods like play, stop, pause, and stuff like that. And this represents the actual object. So the media player wraps the media object. And you may also notice that we are using new here. So we're doing media MP video equals new media player. That's because these were not declared with the fxml, because these are not actually views. The video one, we won't have to use mv video equals new media video or media view, because it's already made in our sample or in our fxml file. But these, think of them separately, we have to declare them because they're not actually made. And then finally, we have our media view, which is actually what displays the media that we want to display. So this wraps our media player. So we'll do mv video dot set media player and that will be the MP video that we made right above. And now let's just import our other resources. So these are the images that will go on our labels and our buttons. And so let me set all these up, and then I'll go over the general concept of what we're doing here. So basically what we're doing here is we're creating an image by creating a file from our resource and then getting it to URI. And to display our image, we then need to place it in an image view. So the image view is actually what displays the image. And we'll be using the image views that we created earlier. So the ones we created up here, we're using all these here. And then these will be placed in our labels or buttons, like I said earlier. And we also set the height and width to a final value of 25 because they're all going to be roughly 25 in size. And then we can set the graphics of our labels and buttons by using the set graphics method. So when the application starts, let's set the button to pause because the video will be playing, and then the volume label to be muted because the video is muted when we started. We want the full screen label to be full screen and the speed to be 1x. So the first thing we'll do with our button is we'll set the graphic to IV pause because the video will be playing when it starts, and then we want to do label volume, and we want to set that graphic to IV mute because it's going to be muted when we start. And then we want to set the label speed. We're not using a graphic for that. We're just going to use set the text. And we're going to set that to 1 times. And then we're going to do the label full screen. We're going to set that graphic to IV full screen. All right. And now let's just see, make sure, moment of truth, that we did any typos or anything. Okay, and so you might have noticed that this was not showing up, and I didn't really know why, and I was looking more into it. And if you look up here, you can see that controller is not actually being used by our Fxml file, so we still need to actually link these. And so the way you can do that in here is, so usually I'm in Scene Builder here. I'm going into text version of it here, and for VBox, which is our parent element, we can add fx controller, and that will be sample, because that's the package, .controller. So now our Fxml file should be linked up. So let's go back into our controller, and good. Now these are highlighted. This is highlighted, so it's been using. So let's try and run this one more time. And so an issue we were having with why it wasn't loading was the name right here. So I had a little mark right here, a single quote. So if you get rid of that and press play, don't know if you noticed it while I was typing it, but now you can see that the video is loaded. So of course we got to change the size and everything. But for now, you can see that we've got our labels. Some styling, of course, needs to change, but we'll work with that as we start adding more of the functionality. But for now, it looks like we're on track. And now also, when our application starts, we want the volume slider to be removed. This is how we get it to appear and disappear when the cursor goes over it. So now let's go back down to our bottom here. We're going to add in hbox volume.getChildren, because you remember the slider is one of its children, and we're going to use remove. And what we're going to remove is the slider, or the volume slider. So when the program starts, when it starts off, that will be invisible. And now we're going to sync the volume property of our video player to the value of our slider. We'll be using Bi-Directional Binding, which makes it so that if either property changes, the other property is automatically changed as well. So if the slider value changes, the volume does, and also vice versa. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to tag on to the volume property of our media player. And then we do the bind directional method, and we do slider volume, and we bind that to the slider's value property. Also, we need to bind the current time of our video to the current time label. However, we'll be doing this frequently due to some unbinding that we have to do at some point to fix with or match our total time label and our current time label. You'll see this in the future. But to do this binding, we're going to create a function that binds the label, and we're going to call it bind current time label. And when that starts, we want to actually bind it. So we're going to do bind current time label like this, and then we're going to create this function down at the bottom. So let's go down here, and within our class, let's create public void because it won't return anything, and we're going to call it bind current time label. It also doesn't accept any arguments, and this function will not return anything, and all it will do is bind the text property of our current time label to the current time property of the media player. And so to do that, with our label of our current time, we want to get the text property from that, and what we want to do is we want to bind that with bindings dot create string binding, and we have to pass in a new callable just like this, and then this is where we want to return a method, return get time, and we're going to do mpvideo dot get current time, so get the current time of the video, and then we also want to tag on with this dash here, so this will be the current time. So this will show, we'll retrieve the current time of our video and then tag on a string here. And you can see also this method here, getTime, is one that we haven't created yet. But then forget that for now. We're going to be making that in the future. But now what we need to do is we need to tag on here mpvideo.currentTime property. And then close this off here. So the bottom of our Java file, let's create the getTime method. It will return a string, which is formatted time, and it will take a duration object as an argument, and this will be the duration of the video. So it's going to take the duration of the video and return the time from it. So we're going to do public string, because it returns a string, time, pass in duration, we'll just call it time. And then what we're going to retrieve from this duration is first we're going to retrieve the hours, which will be an integer, but we have to cast it, and from the time that we passed in, we use the function 2 hours. But first, let's import this. And then the next thing we want also is our minutes. And once again, we have to cast this. But then we're going to do time.toMinutes. And then the other thing we want is the seconds. And we're going to once again cast this to an int. Do time.toSeconds. So we're going to get those like that. And now let's fix an issue where when the timer will count to 61 for minutes, hours, etc., we want it to restart. So we don't want it to go to 61, we just want it to restart. I believe I need to change this. So the way we're going to do that is we are going to check for each of these, if the seconds is greater than 59, then seconds we're going to set equal to itself divided by 60 and take the remainder of that. So if it's become 61, then it'll return 1. If it's 62, it'll return 2. And this will means that in our timer, when it's counting up or counting down, it'll, instead of showing 62, it'll show 02. And we also want to do that with the minutes and the hours. And something we also need to do is make it so the hours only appear if the video is an hour or longer. So we need to check for this by checking if the hours are greater than 0. If they are, we'll return our string formatted with the hour, a colon, and then 2 numbers for the minutes and seconds. But if the video is less than an hour, then we'll return just the formatted minute, minute, colon, second, second. So to do this, of course, first we're going to check if the hours are greater than 0. If they are, then we want to return string.format, and our formatted string, want it to be an integer here, a colon, 2 numbers here, and then 2 numbers here. I believe I forgot percentage sign here. And then for the arguments, it will be our hours, will be the first one, minutes, next, and then seconds, like this. So of course we've got 3 arguments here, so we need 3 here. One is %d, one is %02d, and the other is %02d. So we've got 3 of those, 3 here. On the other hand, if we don't have any hours, then what we just want to return is a string. I want to format it where it is just the minute, minute, colon, second, second, second. So we will do %02d, colon, %02d, like this. And then we'll pass in minutes and seconds, just like this. And I believe we spelt this wrong up here, so this error is coming from, we said ret run, when it should be return, just like this. And then I believe I actually used the wrong duration, so we're using java.time.duration, we should be using javafx.util.duration. So I'm going to do this again. Duration, javafx.util, just like this. And we can see that error is gone. All right, now let's go back up here, just right below here, and we're going to start using our button. So let's start off with our button that plays, pauses, and restarts the video. And to do this, we're going to set an event handler on that button. So remember, our button is called button P and then R. We're going to do set on action. We're going to pass in a new event handler. Of course, that gives us the handle event. And now first let's retrieve the button from the action event. We'll do this by using the getSource method and casting it from an object to a button. So we'll do button, let's just call it button play. Get to set that equal to a cast of button, and we'll do action event dot get source, just like this. And we want this button so we can change the graphic or image that is shown on it. So when they press it, we might want to change it to the play sign or the pause sign or restart based on what is currently going on with the video. And now let's start with if it is at the end of the video. If it is at the end of the video and the button is clicked, we want to set the slider value to 0 so the video restarts, and we then want to set the end of the video to false and is playing to false. So we're going to do if at end of video slider time dot set value to 0, and then we'll do at end of video equals false, and we'll set is playing also to be false. And now if the button is clicked and is playing is true, in other words, the video is actually playing, then we want to set the graphic to the play button, pause the video, and set is playing accordingly, or set is playing to false. This will pause the video and change the graphic accordingly. So let's create another if statement down here, and we're just going to check if is playing. Make sure you use autocomplete. If is playing, then we want to get the button play, and we want to set the graphic to play, because the user has paused it, and so now they want to play it. And we'll set the MP video. Of course, we'll pause the video. And then the other thing we'll do is we'll set is playing equal to false, just like this. And so now, if is playing is false, this means the user wants to press the button to make the video play again. So let's set the graphic to the pause button, play the video, and set is playing to true. So we're just going to have else, and we're going to change the graphic, so button play dot set graphic to the pause button. And then we're going to play the video, not media video, but the media player. We're going to do dot play, and then we're going to set is playing equal to true. Another thing I want to mention is we set is playing to false here for at the end of the video, because this else statement will then be called. So if is playing is false, this will be called, and therefore the video will start playing when the restart button is clicked. Now let's add a listener onto the value property of our volume slider. We're going to use an invalidation listener, which is notified when an observable value becomes invalid. And validation listener is generated if the current value is not valid anymore. So what we're going to do out here is let's do slider volume dot value property, and let's add a listener onto that, and then new invalidation, or not new initializable, but new invalidation listener, like this. So when the current value of the slider is no longer valid, we want to set the volume of the video to the value of the slider. So within the invalidated, we'll just do MP video dot set volume to the slider volume dot get value, just like this. And now let's do a small check to see if the video is muted or not. We want to see if the volume is equal to 0 or not, because if it's 0, then it means it's muted. But if it is not equal to 0, then it is not muted, and we want to set the volume label's image to the speaker image and set our Boolean is muted to false. So within the same thing, so within our MP video here, first we'll check if, not id, but if MP video dot get volume does not equal to 0.0, then we'll do label volume dot set graphic, and we're going to set that to IV volume, and then we're going to set is muted equal to false, because now it isn't muted anymore. And then on the other hand, if our video is muted, or if our volume is equal to 0, then we want to set the graphic of the label volume to the muted image and set is muted to true. So we'll do label volume dot set graphic IV mute like this, and set is muted equal to true. Now let's quickly add the functionality for the label that works with our speed. So we will set a mouse click listener on it. We can then just check the label speed to see if it equals to 1x. And if it is, then that means the user wants to increase the speed, so we'll set it to 2x and the rate of the video to 2. This is easily done with the set rate method of the media player. And then on the other hand, the speed is already 2 times. That means the user wants to go back to the speed of 1, and we'll set it to 1. So outside of our slider, but still within our initialize, we're going to do label speed, and we're going to set an on mouse clicked, and we're going to pass a new event handler so we can handle this mouse event. And then we're just going to easily check if the label speed, get the text of it, if that equals to the string 1x, then this means that the user wants to increase the speed. So we'll do label speed dot set text to be 2 times, and then we'll do the MP video, and we'll set the rate of that to be 2 times as well. And then on the other hand, that means it's already at 2, so the user's already listening to it at that speed. We'll do dot set text equal to 1 times, and then we'll do MP video, and we'll set the rate to 1.0, just like this. And now let's add some functionality for the label volume. We want to make it so that when someone clicks on it, the video gets muted if it is not currently muted, and vice versa. So let's add a mouse listener onto our label, and this label I believe is called label volume. So then we'll set on mouse clicked again, a new event handler so we can handle this mouse event. And now let's do some logic. So we look at our isMuted variable and check if it is true or not. If it is true, then let's adjust our image on the label and set the volume and variable correctly. So setting the slider volume will change the volume. So we're just going to check for if is muted. Then we want to do label volume dot set graphic to IV volume like this. And then we want to do our slider volume, and we want to set the value to be 0.2 here. And then we want to set is muted equal to false. And on the other hand, what we want to do is, so this will be if it is not currently muted, that means the user does want to mute it. So we are going to set the label volume graphic to IV mute, because then we want to show them the option to mute it. And then we'll do slider volume dot set value to 0 and is muted equal to true. And remember, the thing with the slider is the way it works, or the way volume works, is the max volume is 1 and the minimum volume is 0. So slider 0.2 is, if we won't want to send it to something like, if we set it actually 2, that'll just be max volume. So we want to set it to 0.2 because 1 is the highest and 0 is the lowest. And so now let's add some functionality for the appearance and disappearance of our volume slider. So we're going to be using the set on mouse entered listener. So when the user hovers over that volume, we want to make the volume label disappear, or the slider disappear and reappear accordingly. So we're just going to do volume label dot set on mouse entered, which basically means when the mouse is hovering over it or has just entered the area of the label. And so what we want to do is check if the slider is already present in its parent, in their parent hbox or the volume hbox, and we will use the lookup function, which will find the node with a given ID. And we want to check if our slider volume node is present. So we're going to do if hbox volume, and then we're going to use the lookup function, and we're going to look up the ID. So add a hashtag to it, and the ID should be slider volume. If that is equal to null, that means the node is not present. And so if it is null, then we want to get the children of the hbox and add our slider volume. And then we'll set its value and to the current volume of the media player. So we'll do hbox volume dot get children, and then you just do add, and the node we want to add is slider volume, and then we want to do slider volume dot set value to be MP video dot get volume, or the current volume of our video. And I've been doing a lot with JavaScript recently, so I'm used to using, you can just use single quotes, so make sure this is in double because it is a string and not a character. And now let's just remove the slider when the mouse exits the area of the hbox. So this is very simple, and all we do is use the set on mouse exited on our hbox volume and then remove the slider. So we're just going to do hbox volume dot set on mouse exited, pass in the event handler so we can handle everything, and we'll do from the hbox volume, we'll get its children, and then we'll remove the slider volume. Very simple, just like that. And now let's bind the height of our video to the height of the scene. In other words, when the GUI size changes or the window increases, we increase the size of the media view or the size of our video proportionally. And we'll do this by getting the scene property of the VBox. What the scene property returns is the scene that the node is a part of. and then we can add a change listener onto it. So we will do vBoxParent.scene property. And actually, I think this doesn't match up with our ID. So if we look into sample Fxml, you can see we have vBoxParent with a lowercase b. And in here we have vBox with a capital B. So let's scroll up to the top. And let's change this. Where is it? It's all the way up here. And if we change this, hopefully it should highlight now. And then go down here. vBox, V like this. Let's just double check. And there. Okay, so now we're linked up. So remember, we want to make sure that our controller is linked up to our Fxml file correctly. And we'll do scene property, and then we'll add a listener. And this time, we're going to use a change listener, which is going to listen for a change on the scene. And we can call this as observable value. This can be, we can call this the old scene, basically the scene before it was resized. And then this will be the new scene, like this. So this will be called whenever the scene changes. Specifically, we want to work with the new scene or the scene with the new height. So we will check if the new scene is not null and the old scene is null, and then we will bind the height property of the new scene to the media view, but subtract the height of the HBox controls so that the media view doesn't go over the controls, so you can still see the controls in the view. So we'll do if old scene equals null, and the new scene does not equal null, which basically means the window has been resized. Then we will do mv video, and we will get the fit height property, and we will bind this to the new scene, the height property of that, and then from that we want to subtract the HBox controls, the height property of that, but what we want to do is also add a little bit to that so we can get a little bit more spacing. So we'll just add 20 to it like this. And now we can start working with our full screen label. So what we want to do is set an on-click listener and handle the event accordingly. So just the way basically we've been working with everything. So we'll do label full screen, set on mouse clicked, pass in a new event handler so we can handle this. And then first what we want to do is fetch the label that was clicked and then use it to get the stage. And then we use the stage to work with the full scene property or make it full screen. So let's just do label equals, and we're going to cast this to a label, and we'll do mouse event dot get source. So get the label that was clicked, and then we'll do stage equals cast to a stage, the label that we just got, and we're going to get the scene from it, and then from that we're going to get the window, and then we're going to cast the window to stage. Let's just make sure we import the right one. So stage JavaFX, excellent, just like this. So first what we're going to do is we're going to check if the stage is full screen. Because if it is, then the user clicked the label button. It means that they want to exit full screen mode. So let's set the full screen to false and change the label appropriately. So what we're going to do here, sorry about that, we're just going to do if stage dot is full screen. Then we're going to do stage dot set full screen, very simple function, to false, because that means the user exits out of it. And then we'll do label full screen, and we'll set the graphic to IV full screen so that they can go back into full screen by clicking on that. And then on the other hand, so else, what we want to do is we want to set stage dot set full screen to true, and then we want to do label full screen dot set graphic to IV exit, so let them exit out of the screen. However, something else that we want to do is make it so when the graphic changes when the user presses the escape key to leave. So right now this is only if they click on the label. So the label will not change if we press the escape key, because you can escape from full screen by pressing the escape key and not just clicking on this label. So we need to work with that functionality. And the way we will account for this is by setting an event handler on the stage that responds to a key event. Specifically, this will be a key pressed event. So we're going to go in here, make sure we stay within this, and we're going to add stage dot add event handler, and then the event will be key event dot key pressed, and then of course we do a new event handler just like this. And what we want to do here is get the code from the key event, and if it is the escape key, then change the label to the full screen graphic. So if key event dot get code, if that equals keycode dot escape, then we'll do label full screen dot set graphic to IV full screen like this. Now it's going to get a little bit more tricky here, but what we're going to start working with now is the media player. And what we want to do is add a listener to the total duration property. And this will be used to set the max value of the slider and the total time label when a new video is used. So we're going to do MP video, and we're going to get the total duration property, and we're going to add a listener on that, and we're going to do a new change listener, just like this. But let's change these values here. Let's change this one to make it more sense. This will be old duration, and instead of T1, this will be new duration. And now we can set the max value of our slider to be the duration of the video in seconds. And then we want to set the text of the total time label by using the function getTime that we created earlier, which parses the duration of the video into hours, minutes, and seconds format. And so luckily we made that function already, so we can just do slider time dot set max new duration dot 2 seconds. So that's how long the slider will actually be. And then we want to set our label total time. We want to set that text to getTime and new duration. So the new video that is uploaded, we want to set that label appropriately to how long it is, and our slider is the total amount of time of that video in seconds. Now let's start working with our time slider, and we want to add a listener to the value changing property. So let's do down here slider time, and we're going to do the value changing property. I can spell it, value changing property, and we're going to add a listener onto that, and that will be a new change listener. And what we want to do is once the slider has stopped changing, meaning the user has let go of the slider ball, then we want to set the video to that time. So we'll check for if it's no longer changing, or if change is changing, which I believe should be this right here is the previous. So it was changing. So when the current user is sliding it, and then this is changing. So if the user has stopped doing it, or stop moving the slider, if is changing is false, so the user has let go. Let's do MP video. I'm going to use the seek function to set the video to a certain duration. And for that, we can just do duration dot seconds, and then slider time dot get value. Because remember, our slider is working in seconds, so we want to cast the value of this, or the seek, into actual seconds to link up with our slider time. Then another property we want to work with is the value property of the slider. So we need to add a listener here. Value property is the current value represented by the slider, while the value changing property indicates the current value of the slider is changing. So let's go below here. I'm going to do slider time again, but instead of the value changing property, we're just going to do value property. We're going to add a listener, and this will be, once again, a new change listener. And let's change this like usual. Instead of number, this will be old value. I don't know why they changed it to these, but just do what we're doing and just change it to new value. And now what we want to do is get the current time of the video in seconds. And if the difference between the current time of the video and the new time that the user moved the slider to is greater than half a second, let's set the media player to that time. And then we want to make another custom function that will check if the user has moved to the end of the video, and we'll make that function now. So let's start in here. I will do double current time equals MP video dot get current time dot 2 seconds, and then if the absolute value of this, so we're going to use math dot abs, the current time minus the new value dot get the double value from that. If that is greater than half a second, then let's do MP video dot seek, and once again duration dot seconds new value dot double value, just like this. And now we want to make another custom function that will check if the user has moved to the end of the video, and then we can work with the graphics and everything if the user has moved at the end of the video. And what we will do is we'll call it labels match end video, and it's going to take 2 arguments. It's going to take the first one is the text of the current time label, and the other one will be the text of our total time label. But let's make that function below at the bottom. So let's scroll down here, make it right below this one. So this function won't return anything, but it will take 2 string arguments, the ones we passed above, the current time label and the total time label. So let's just call it now, create this method, public void labels match believe it just showed up. Labels match end video, and the first one is string label time, and the other one is string total, or label total time. And then what we want to do is loop through the total time label and compare each character to the character in the current time label. You'll see why we're doing this in a second. So we'll do I equals 0, and then up equal to label total time dot length I plus plus. And if at any point the characters do not match, then we set the end of the video to be false. We also want to check if the video is playing or not and set the graphic of our button appropriately. And we can then break out of this loop. So what we're really doing here is we're looping through each of the characters in our label for total time and seeing if they match the label time here. Because if they do match, then that means that it's at the end of the video or the video has ended. But if not, the video hasn't ended. So we'll do at end of video is false. And then we check if is playing. Then we set our button. We set that graphic to IV pause. And if not, we set the button to IV, not pause, but IV play. And then we can just break out of this loop so we don't have to keep going. However, of course, I forgot the vital part here is we need to check first. We didn't do our if. So we're going to do if label time dot char at the index I. If that does not equal the total time dot char at I, then we want to do all this. And then if not, so else, on the other hand, if the characters all match, then we know the video has ended. So we should set at end of video to true and set the button graphic to the restart video. So we'll do at end of video equals true, and then we'll set the button graphic to the restart image, just like that. And now let's go back up to above our functions here. And what we can do is we can set listener on the media player. And the property we want to listen on is the current time property. And what we want to do is add a change listener to check if the slider value is changing. If the value of the slider is no longer changing, then we want to set the timer to be the new time in seconds. So we'll do MP video. We'll get the current time property, and we'll add a listener onto it, which is a change listener. And then let's just change, what we're going to do is we're going to check if the slider time is value changing. Then we'll do the slider time dot set value to the new time dot 2 seconds. But of course we didn't make this new time, it's still T1. So new time, change this duration here to old time, just like that. And then once again, we want to check if the labels match at the end of the video. And if they do, then we know we're at the end of the video. So then what we're also going to do is we'll check labels match end video. Why isn't this showing up? What did we do? Oh, I believe we just missed out this here. So it's label match end video. Then we'll do label current time. We'll get the text from that. And then the total time. Remember, this is where we're basically checking if the video has ended based off of the labels. So get text just like this. And we're getting really close to finish now. We're getting pretty close to be finishing. But one of the final things we need to do is set an end of media listener on our media player. And this will be executed when the video ends. And what we want to do when the video ends is set at end of video to true and set the graphic of the button to the restart image. So we set that. It's just set on end of media. And it takes a runnable. So just pass in a new runnable. And what we want to pass in is the button. And we're going to set the graphic to restart. And we're going to set at end of video equal to true, just like this. And then something we need to do is some videos end, but the time doesn't sync exactly. I believe it has to do with some rounding error. For example, the video might be done, but it might say 39 seconds out of 40. So when the video is over, we want to make sure that the label time text properties actually do match. So we're going to do if label current time dot text property dot equals label total time dot text property. And then what we want to do, not package. However, this is where the reason we made this bind current time label. because to actually set the text property of a label, we have to unbind it. You can't set the text of a bound of something that is bound to another element. So we need to unbind the text property from the slider, and then we set the text with our getTime function from the video's total duration. So let's do label current time dot text property dot unbind, not unbind bidirectional, but just unbind. And then we'll do label current time dot set text to be getTime mp video dot get total duration. And then of course we want to tag on this here because it is out of, just like that. And so now this is basically the end of our application. So let's just run and see what this looks like and check for some minor bugs that we might need to fix. And so right off the bat, you can see our media view right here isn't the correct size, or it's not changing with the as our scene changes in size. We also have an alignment issue here, and the word label seems to be here. So let's start fixing these. So for the media view, what we should do is we must have set a height and a width on it. So if we go in here and click on this, I believe it should be in properties or layout. Yeah, we set a fit width to 250 and 250, but let's just set that to 0. And now let's stop this and run it again. Cool, there we go. And so now we can see that's changing. So that was another error. Another thing, let's change the title up here and the default size. So to do that, let's go back, let's go into main, and this is where we're actually setting the size. Let's do a width of 15, let's do 1200, and a height of 900, and let's change this to width codes media player. And now let's see what this looks like right off the bat. Okay, that's a bit bigger than I thought, but that doesn't look too bad. And then the last thing, so you can change the size if you want it to be smaller. I'm just going to keep it that way for now. And then another thing is, let's get rid of this label and center that stuff within the H box. So if we open up this, we can see we have the term label here, so we can delete that. And then what else was wrong? This is inside our H box for top left. Let's change the alignment to center. I think that was the issue. And then let's press play. Okay, it looks better so far. We've got, yep,
IP addresses.
Awesome. So that looks good. Everything else I believe is working at the moment. Let's try and move this over here. Press replay. Awesome. We can move this up here. Yep. Okay, so it's all looking good. We can max screen, exit out of it, change the rate. Awesome. And so the last thing we need to do is we need to rebind our label. So as I was saying in here, where was it? Right here where we have to unbind our current time label, we need to rebind this. And so that's why we made this bind current time label method. And the places we need to do that is where we need to reconnect it. And from that, we should do it within here. So when we press replay, for example, we want to do bind current label time, and then not in the slider volume, not in the label speed, or on that, but we want to do it in the MP video duration property. So let's do bind current time label here. We also want to do it when the value is changing. I believe we actually added that in here. And we also want to add it here into slider time value property and current time property as well. And that should be it. So this should be the whole thing. So everything should be working now. So let's run this one more time. Resize this. And let's just double check. Awesome. So everything looks like it's working. So this was my video on how to make a media player with JavaFX. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll try to get back to you, but I'll see you in the next video.